Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, it's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and I do want to take a trip down memory lane with you. I haven't spoken with you yet, but one of my Forbes colleagues did before the midterms last year, about 15 months ago. And in that really long conversation you had with him, you said the biggest issue facing voters is inflation. Now, fast forward over a year, we're sitting here now. Do you think that's the biggest issue facing Americans as we speak?
Yes, because the administration is trying to give us this line about inflation is down. Well, the inflation rate has gone down, but the impact of inflation over the last 2.5 years has impacted every American. Food prices, electricity prices, travel, airfare, you name it, it's all up and up significantly. So if you take the cumulative effect of this inflation unleashed on our country by Joe Biden and his crazy policies, the cumulative effect is about 15 to 16% overall in price increases. Now, listen, if you're a wealthy American or even an upper middle class American, you can weather it, find a way through it. It makes some adjustments in your life, but you can get through it. But if you're a poor American, if you're a senior on fixed income, this crushes you and it's having serious effects. I've had conversations with people throughout the country. Actually, a friend of mine the other day, and the conversation was like, "Have you seen the price of a loaf of bread? It's like $4 right now when it used to be two." Those consumer staples, those things everybody needs to survive, the cost has gone up so much, and that is still crippling so many Americans.
I do want to talk about that because I talked about the most recent CPI report last week with a Forbes colleague. And the consensus that they came to was inflation is at a 2-year low, but, and that's a huge but, because prices are remaining sticky. And yes, gas prices are down. Yes, the price of eggs are down, but rent prices are still high. Automobile related prices are still high. Those prices that are impacting the everyday American are still high. So what's Congress doing right now to fix it?
Well, the number one thing we're trying to do here on Capitol Hill is cut spending. We're really trying to make sure we pull as much money that does not needs to be spent, and we pull it out of what the government does, what comes out of our economy. You get inflation by the government pumping too much money into an economy, chasing too few goods. That's what occurred. And if we're going to be technical, what Joe Biden did when he came into office is he created a labor shortage in the United States by paying people to stay home. That's what he did. And it's created this massive inflation. So the first thing we're doing is cutting federal spending. The second thing that we need to seriously do is have serious energy production in the United States. These Green New Deal technologies that the left wants to take us down, that's great for countries like China because they're the ones mining all the minerals and they're the ones creating the components that get assembled in some other country or even assembled in the United States. But increased energy costs will only allow this inflation to continue to be sticky. We need fossil fuels because fossil fuels is how you get the stock you need for fertilizer. Fertilizer costs are up 150, 200%. Well, what that means is the price of food is up as a result because you need fertilizer in order to grow crops. You need fertilizer in order to make sure you have grass, and feedstock for cows and for hogs and everything like that. So you have to be energy sufficient and proficient domestically here at home. I believe that's a mixture of nuclear power, that's a mixture of natural gas, and yes, it's a use of oil and even coal in some instances. But we got to get away from this thought process that we can massively subsidize Green New Deal energy technologies and think that's not going to have a serious economic impact on working families in our country.
Where do you bridge the gap on this conversation when it comes to Democrats? Because you did say we need fossil fuels. And I think that if you told that to many Democrats, that might be a non-starter for them. In the conversation you had with my colleague last year, you said Congress was dysfunctional and that the place is not built for collaboration. Where can you see yourself working with Democrats on this specific issue?
Well, I think there's been a lot of bipartisan conversations and in what I feel a come to Jesus moment around nuclear power. Even for the Democrats who want to have everything be electric cars, electric trucks, whatever the case might be. The problem you have with that is there's not enough baseload power on the electric grid to power all these new electric cars and everything else. So I think they're starting to realize the issue and what they want to see happen. And so they're starting to embrace nuclear power. Nuclear power in our country would really be a game changer for us. And we already have nuclear power. Let me not say that we don't, but increasing the amount of baseload power using nuclear and other sources will be tremendous for us because it gives you the electricity you need. And I think there's some common ground around that. A lot of other things, it's just going to take political elections and the will of the people to shift those thoughts and those mindsets. But if there's good policy to work on, we can do that. When it doesn't exist, it's a majoritarian body. Whoever has the votes, that's basically what happens.
Is there anywhere else you can see yourself working with Democrats on in the remainder of this Congress?
So we are going to have to go through, I think, FISA reauthorization. And so I think we do have a serious issue with the FISA courts. Let's be very clear. And so I think there's going to be room to be able to work in a collaborative fashion on that. Reauthorizing Homeland Security, I think there's going to be ways to collaborate on that. And let's just be clear. My position is, why would I fund a Department of Homeland Security that doesn't secure the homeland? And that just doesn't even make sense logically. So we got to find a way to make sure that we're doing all the things to secure the homeland. I think that's a place where Democrats and Republicans can actually work together. So I think there's some areas to do that. Those are the ones I can think of off top of mind. Maybe there'll be some other stuff that comes up that we'll have to deal with, and we'll figure it out as we go.
Can we talk a little bit more about specifically securing the homeland? Because I feel so lucky to have the opportunity to talk to both Democrats and Republican members of Congress. And in every single conversation, the idea of the border has come up. There's a crisis at the border is not secure. Both sides agree on that. So where can there be an understanding here of, hey, we do recognize a problem, here's how we fix it?
That's going to be tough. I'm just going to be honest with you, because a lot of my Democratic colleagues won't even go to the border. And I've been on field hearings where the border is 2 miles away from the field hearing. They won't go. And it's tough to solve problems if you won't see them firsthand. So I think it's important that the Democrat members who do want to see these issues, those are the people that we have to go to first and work with and be constructive about this. We cannot have a border where the cartel has operational control. And what a lot of Americans need to understand is that under Joe Biden's use of asylum, or his misuse of asylum, in my view, the drug cartels have operational control of our southern border. That's unacceptable, especially considering the amount of fentanyl that's flowing into our country. So I think there's ways to do this while understanding that, we have people who desire to come to the United States. Ronald Reagan said it best. Look, we can have our walls, but there should be doors for people with the means and the want and the desire to get here. But that's through an orderly, legal process, not by abusing the asylum provisions of our laws.
In the conversation with my Forbes colleague last year, you expressed your support for term limits. You said you will not be in Congress forever. You're on the younger side of Congress. NBC calculated the average age of a member in this Congress is 57.5 years old. You are well below that. So what do you see for yourself next in terms of political career, political move? What's next for Byron Donalds?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I mean, look, everybody speculates. I hear the talk about different offices and things like that. But what I learned a long time ago is you can't plan politics. All you could do is do your job, be in position, and if something opens up, then you make that decision, or you don't. So for me personally, I told my district, you basically got 10 years out of me max. That'll take me to being about 51, 52 years old, and then it'll be time for somebody else. I think fresh blood coming in is a good thing, is going to be a very good thing for this institution. And I know that we have a lot of members who've served for a very long time here, and I respect them and all that they've tried to do and accomplish for our country. Some I disagree with, and we have those disagreements. But we have to get to a place where there is a refreshing mindset that comes through the halls at Capitol Hill. And that goes for me too.
You'd be hard-pressed to find any American to say, wow, politics have really been a peaceful past few years. So how do you move on in a way that there's understanding between both parties?
Well, the first thing is that we have some responsibilities up here on Capitol Hill to clean out the federal bureaucracy. And the reason why that matters in terms of politics is because, yes, we have agencies that have been suppressing free speech. That is unacceptable, it is unconstitutional, and it's un American. The very basis of our nation is that you are free to speak your mind without retribution from the government. That's not been occurring. So if you want to have an open political process where people can exchange ideas and get away from dogma, they got to be able to express their views. and and for federal agencies to use their power to suppress speech undermines our republic. It undermines our democracy. So that's step one. Step two are actually shows like this one. I think getting away from the big media platforms. And I know Forbes has been around for a long time, great publication. But you got to have more debate. You have to have more options to view information because information flow is the thing that helps to start the logic process for every human being. You know, they make decisions based upon what they hear and what they see. That's how people make decisions. So it's going to be important that, you know, we have a lot of information floating through the internet, whatever the case might be. I think a free social media environment is critical to this because that allows for the free flowing of ideas. So those are just a couple to name a few. And I think when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, members, politicians, people running for office, etc., I think, you know, we're kind of in the era of, it used to be like, in my view, it was an era of like just likability. If you had the right suit, your hair was combed the right way, you know, if you had the cool little ad, that's kind of what worked. And I think we're definitely in the era, we're definitely in the era of likability, yes, but authenticity, even more so than likability. I think if people see like that's a real person, even though I might disagree with some things, I can vote for that. But the days of the empty suit politician, yeah, them days are over.
I do appreciate you complimenting the show only because I appreciate all of your colleagues coming on and having these longer discussions with me. I think they're vital for Americans to hear. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about some current events, starting with last night. Former President Donald Trump was charged with 3 new felonies in the classified documents case. He was also indicted twice this year. As you know, you are a supporter of the former president. Does this news, do these indictments deter you at all?
No, they don't. And I will add, they actually embolden my support for President Trump because what we are seeing is a two-tier justice system. What we are seeing is the weaponization of the Department of Justice against political rivals. That is exactly what is happening here. Compare the two cases that are happening in front of our eyes. Hunter Biden got a sweetheart plea deal, and it was a sweetheart plea deal. And the only reason why it fell apart is because the federal judge started asking questions about the elements of the plea deal. Meanwhile, you have a former president who, by the way, has documents and who still has top security clearance in the country. I think what's lost on a lot of people is the former presidents, all of them, still get the daily presidential briefing. They still get it when they leave office. So they keep their security clearance. The Presidential Records Act gives every president a 5-year period to go through all their documents and work with NARA. What's happened here is NARA and the Department of Justice and the White House decided that they wanted to take an administrative issue and criminalize it. It is disgusting and it's wrong. You don't want to like Donald Trump, that's fine. But to turn the Department of Justice against a former president, who, by the way, is running for president, is obscene. And I think that most Americans see it.
I am going to ask you about Hunter Biden in just a moment, but I'm sure you did see the photos and the unsealed indictment of documents in a shower, in a bathroom, in a ballroom. If one of the foreign leaders abroad, our allies or not, was holding classified documents this way, what would you make of that?
Wait, I want to make sure I hear this right. If a foreign leader was holding these
So,
documents?
so no, not our documents. So if what would your reaction be if a former leader of one of our friends kept their documents this way? Like the former leader of Germany, the former leader of the UK, someone like that.
Well, the first thing is, and this is where these pictures come in. First, that's a leak from the Department of Justice, which, by the way, is a criminal act. The Department of Justice is not allowed to leak information to the press. You couldn't get those pictures, and they got them before they released the indictment. So the Department of Justice is not allowed to leak information to the press. You couldn't get those pictures, and they got them before they released the indictment. You couldn't get those pictures, and they got them before they released the indictment. But you couldn't do that unless somebody leaked it from the Department of Justice. That's one. Number two, the areas in question on Mar-a-Lago are actually secure. Are they secured skiffs? No. But Mar-a-Lago is patrolled by Secret Service. I've been there many times. You just can't walk around the place and walk into a room and say, "Ooh, look at these documents. Let me grab them." If they're stored in a room, NARA knows that they're stored in various rooms. The fact that they want to release it to try to defame or to damage President Trump is wrong. That's number two. Number three, every president has taken documents with them. Every one of them has. This has never been an issue with any other president. President Obama took millions of pages of documents. His documents were stored they were in a storage locker in Chicago. NARA went out and saw it, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this isn't as secure as we want." Did they go through some administrative procedure against President Obama? No, they didn't. Did they go to the Department of Justice and try to say, "Oh my gosh, these records are not secure. We need to bring in the Department of Justice"? No, they didn't. And that's the problem that we're having here.
Do you think the issue here is the alleged cover-up of the mishandling of these documents? Because that's what seems to be the difference between how he handled those documents and how President Joe Biden handled the documents that were found in his garage. Do you see a difference at all between the two cases?
The only difference is that this is pure politics. That's the difference in the case. Let's talk about a little bit, because you raised a good point. The documents found at President Biden's beach house, which, by the way, I don't know how you buy a beach house on a U.S. senator's salary, because they don't make that much money. But that being said, the documents in question were from when he was vice president of the United States. Vice presidents do not have the ability to take documents with them. He had other documents from when he was a United States United States congressman. It is a violation of the Espionage Act for me to remove classified information from a skiff. U.S. senators don't have that ability. U.S. congressmen don't have that ability. But Joe Biden did that. Is the Department of Justice going after him? No. The only reason why they're doing this is because Donald Trump is running for president, and they're trying to weaponize our justice system. It's wrong. So there's no justification for what they're doing. Let me add this. Jack Smith, the special counsel, he was actually up to be a U.S. attorney. You know who didn't let him be a U.S. attorney? Donald Trump, because he didn't give him the job. So Jack Smith doesn't have any issues with Donald Trump? Give me a break. This is the problem that is going on. Oh, and by the way, the special counsel looking into the Joe Biden document case, they're still doing their investigation. So why is it that their investigation moves very, very slow? Because Joe Biden had documents that were not secure, that he shouldn't have had anyway, versus Donald Trump's, who were actually secured in his property. That is secured by Secret Service. This is what I'm talking about. If you want to say how he handled documents, this is why the president and every former president has the ability to cooperate with NARA over a 5-year period.
I am curious. I know this is a hypothetical, but let's say he tapped you to be vice president. Is that something you would be interested in?
Yeah. I mean, it's an option. Look, the funny thing is, people give these political answers. Oh, well, I'm just working on behalf of my community. And come on, man. If you're asked to serve in that capacity, who says no? Unless once you really go through that process, and it may not be a good thing for your family. It just may not be time. You might want to do something else, etc. And that's all fine. Everybody makes decisions. But to consider it, of course, anybody would.
And do you think this would be the time?
I don't know. You got to see where you are when you get there. And that's me. That's how I am. I always, when I talk to my sons, I always try to tell my sons, like, listen, when you come to these points in your life, yeah, you're going to have to make a hard decision sometimes. I always tell them, take the hard road. You actually come out a better person at the end. That's my advice for my own children. But I think in terms of preparing yourself for the next thing, my attitude is just stay ready. You got to always be ready. If you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. That's the way I am.
Well, I love that advice. And I do now want to switch gears really quickly to Hunter Biden. You did mention that plea deal did crumble earlier this week. What do you make of that?
I think the reason why the plea deal fell apart is because it was a bogus plea deal. This is something to sweep what Hunter Biden has been doing under the rug. One of the parts of this plea deal is that they try to give him immunity from any charges dealing with being an unregistered foreign agent. Now, what people need to remember is Paul Manafort, who worked for Donald Trump, He was an unregistered foreign agent. They threw Paul Manafort in jail. The Department of Justice just tried to immunize Hunter Biden from prosecution for that very same thing. So that is serious issues in my view, of obstruction of justice at the Department of Justice, let alone the fact that the IRS investigation was slow walked and stonewalled by elements of the Department of Justice. David Weiss wasn't allowed to bring charges in California and DC because the AUSAs didn't want to do that. Like, why would you not want to? So I think what you're seeing here overall around Joe Biden is a web of corruption, where Hunter Biden was the front man to go take money from foreign countries and foreign companies, and they were influence peddling based upon Joe Biden's position and power. Period. End of story.
The House Oversight Committee has been investigating Hunter Biden and his business dealings, and something that has come up is that there isn't that definitive link to Joe Biden and his family's business dealings, what many are calling that smoking gun. How has that investigation been going, and do you think you will find that what many are calling the smoking gun?
Well, the investigation is actually going even better than I thought it was going to go. We didn't really know how this was going to happen for us, but what's occurred is a couple things. One, we were able to get access to information using our power as the majority here in Congress. The second thing that started happening is whistleblowers in the federal government started coming forward, talking about, at a minimum, the slow walking of these investigations. And then the third thing that has now occurred is that you have people like Devin Archer, who's going to testify in front of he's going to do a transcribed interview with the Oversight Committee on Monday, where you have other people who are in this orbit, this web of corruption around Joe Biden are now coming forward and they're testifying. I think what we're going to see is we're going to try to start getting access to financial records to make those ties of money coming from Burisma or CEFC or Romania or Russia is a new country that, from my understanding, is going to start coming out soon, and see those ties of how the money flows through companies that Hunter Biden controlled and how he was paying for and or sending money to Joe Biden himself. What I personally think has occurred is that Hunter Biden was paying the bills. And actually, there's a text message that Hunter Biden sent in 2019 to his daughter saying, I'm basically paying the bills from my dad. So those are his words, not mine. So I think that's the stuff that we're going to see. When the IRS came and testified in front of the Oversight Committee, what they clearly said in their testimony was that Hunter Biden was living off of the corporate accounts. And my question to the investigators was, if somebody is paying for all their living expenses out of their corporate accounts, is that grounds for an investigation into tax evasion? Oh, yes. That is literally the basis of how you start a tax evasion investigation, is because that's what Hunter Biden was doing. They were shielding this money from the American people. They were doing it on purpose.
Well, as your committee continues to investigate, I hope you come back on. But the idea of an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden has come up, especially this past week. Is that something you would support?
Yes, I do, because I do believe that we have grounds for that inquiry. Number one, you have a president who's been pushing this Green New Deal agenda we talked about a little bit earlier. He's been pushing that. But what nobody ever told the American people is that his son facilitated the sale of a cobalt mine for a Chinese company in Africa. Hunter Biden did that. The New York Times has reported that. So if Hunter Biden's facilitating the sale of a mineral critical to solar panels, and President Biden is pushing a massive agenda for us to get and use and buy solar panels, does anybody think there's not a conflict of interest? That's number one. Number two, it is pretty clear to me that Joe Biden did use the weight of his office to influence policy in Ukraine when he was vice president of the United States. The Burisma executives told the FBI's, or they told the FBI's confidential human source, that the Bidens got $10 million from Burisma. $10 million, right? And then months later, Joe Biden is telling Ukrainian officials in his capacity as vice president that he's going to withhold loans and make sure loans do not go to Ukraine if they keep the prosecutor looking into Burisma. That is public corruption. That's pay for play. The Democrats went after Donald Trump because he talked to Vladimir Zelensky about this issue. Joe Biden actually did the issue. So I think that's grounds number 2. Grounds number 3 is, and this is, I think, this still is what needs to be proven. I do believe that the White House, through Merrick Garland, have obstructed justice by stonewalling and covering up these investigations into Hunter Biden. And if we can prove that, then I believe not only do you have impeachment of Joe Biden, but you have impeachment of Merrick Garland as well.
Is that just based on a hunch, or do you think you can find that proof? What does that proof look like?
Oh, it's based on no hunch. It's based on the fact that, and let me break this down a little bit more detail. Hunter Biden gets a plea deal. You mean to tell me that the Attorney General of the United States doesn't know what's in that plea deal? That the Deputy Attorney General of the United States doesn't know what's in that plea deal? That the Chief of Staff to the Attorney General doesn't know what's in that plea deal? Second question. You don't think that the White House counsel knows about said plea deal and that the president doesn't know? It's his son. He knows. So that's number 1. And I think that it's easy to tie that. Number 2, David Weiss, who was investigating Hunter Biden, wanted to bring charges in D.C. and in California. The AUSAs, who all report to Merrick Garland, did not let him bring charges going forward. You telling me the Attorney General made no indication to his other AUSAs that they should allow this to occur? The only person, when you have a district, when you have a U.S. attorney in one district go to another U.S. attorney, the conduit for that is actually the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who right now is Lisa Monaco. If Lisa Monaco knows, Merrick Garland knows. If the U.S. attorneys in the other jurisdictions stop charges which legitimately should have been brought, that's obstruction of justice. That's not prosecutorial discretion.
I'm not comparing the two impeachment inquiries. Donald Trump was impeached. There's now questions being floated about a potential Joe Biden impeachment inquiry. Do you think that this could potentially be setting a precedent of impeaching presidents, for every president you might not agree with politically?
No, and here's why. Here's why let me say it this way. When we took over the majority, I was asked about impeachment a lot. And my concern is that I didn't want impeachment, and impeachment should never be a political tool, a political weapon. I do believe that the Democrats use it as a political tool and a political weapon. Because if you're going to impeach Donald Trump for talking to Vladimir Zelensky about what was happening with Burisma, that's a problem. That's not an impeachable offense. That's one world leader talking to another. So that's number 1. Put that to the side. What we've done in the Oversight Committee is gone through a painstaking investigation to pull out evidence of public corruption. What we found speaks for itself, so much so that the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, will not answer questions in the daily presidential briefing. Joe Biden will not sit for an interview with the press and even talk about any of this stuff. He ignores it and walks out the room. They have no defense. And what's even worse is most of the media doesn't even cover this. It's not as if they come out and say, well, the Republicans are saying that, but here's why it's faulty and wrong. They don't cover it. They ignore it. So that tells me that we definitely are onto something. I've also been very clear. If there are high crimes and misdemeanors that have been committed, then Congress does have a responsibility to impeach a president. We have that responsibility. But should it be weaponized? No, it should not. So that's why we're going through this process of actually building out a case and building out an argument. Democrats basically moved on the first impeachment after 2 months. We've been investigating for 6, and we're still going to investigate.
Congressman, we have to leave it there, but I really appreciate this conversation, and you're welcome back anytime. Congressman Byron Donalds, thanks so much.
No, thanks for having me. It was awesome.